Don't necessarily have to worry about that going on in this matchup, but definitely a reason for that type of team building.
And the fact that Lorcy has the fast and the slow mode, I'm interested to see which one he's going for. Iron Hands and Frigoraph on the field. This normally smells like Trick Room to me, whereas on Victor Medina's side, it is that Raging Bolt and Landorus.
And at this point, too, you can't be pressuring over on the other end of the field here. The Raging Bolt, this is going to be the Calm Mind leftover set that you can't be going for a Calm Mind and setting up for. So if we do see a little bit more of a passive turn, we can be looking for that setup. Of course, then you do have to worry about that Raging Bolt, maybe even just taking some powerful hits from the Iron Hand. Since it is a clear amulet, you are building for offense. It is something that can do a lot of damage in a Trick Room situation. The fake out to stop the Landorus from firing off an attack, but there's the setup.
Absolutely love this play. Victor Medina capitalizing on the fact that he doesn't really have a way to stop the Trick Room from going up, so instead going to make sure there's some defensive capabilities in its face by going for that Calm Mind. Trick Room has indeed been launched by Joshua Lorcy, and those turns will start ticking away. If you're Victor Medina, you want to find a way to either get some KOs in this time, but also burn through the Trick Room turns to get that speed advantage at the end.
The one thing about the Iron Hands, especially for a more offensive set, is it actually has some really nice coverage moves going on forwards. And you, with the Raging Bolt staring down the Frigoraph on the other end, you don't want something like a Dazzling Gleam to be coming out and dealing some damage here. It's going to be Terrestrialization at this point. That is going to be into the Fairy type. Notably, though, you are still weak to something that the Iron Hands can be throwing out into it, though it won't be doing that significant damage considering the weight of the Pokemon. Landorus on this turn, just the Protect.
Yes, Victor stalling through these turns, trying to keep that Landorus a little bit safer. The close combat was actually the move of choice into that Protect, so no damage from this Iron Hands on this occasion as the Frigoraph is able to go for that Psychic. Fantastic defensive play by Victor going for that Protect. Now what is this Raging Bolt going to do? It's the Dragon Pulse is the choice.
+1 special attack fired off in the Frigoraph that will bring it down to about 3rd health, so you can get the Citrus Berry recovery there. It'll be close whether it does survive past that one next turn, though. Great opportunity for Victor not to be taking any damage on his end of the field there, but you still have to be really, really careful. There's going to be a couple of things that won't really appreciate the swap-in given, and the Landorus, it's such a powerful Pokemon, it feels bad to give it up for free.
Exactly, and Landorus is such a threat. You can understand why Joshua was trying to, double into it, remove it from the field. But you also, if you're Joshua, want to make sure that you've got Pokemon on that can deal big damage out. So the close combat coming through, kind of underwhelming, and you are going to get the defense drop here on both defense and special defense for your troubles. That will leave you a little bit more vulnerable to a follow-up from Victor's side. The Psychic comes through, is enough to be able to get the knockout, though. So Frigoraph getting a KO.
So one powerhouse Pokemon is going to be taken care of in this. Raging Bolt, Dragon Pulse, in the Frigoraph again. Won't even find out if it was going to be close. Critical hit will seal the deal. Trading 1-for-1 Pokemon over on this turn.
This is where things get interesting, though, because as the Trick Room trainer, you can now bring in one of your sweepers, and Blood Moon Ursaluna is fantastic at this. However, it is a special attacker, and that Calm Mind on the opposing side, on Raging Bolt's side, is going to help Victor out from withstanding these attacks.
And with Frigoraph gone as well, bringing in the Incineroar, you do have access to your priority moves. You do have access to your Fake Out once again. So there is something that can be stopped on this turn of Trick Room. And with no capability and no way of setting that back up, you are limited for time for how often that Dimensions and that speed is going to be in your favor. You are also at that -1 defense and -1 special defense too. So the Iron Hands at any point doesn't really feel the safest.
We have previously seen Iron Hands go for something like a Volt Switch, but that's not something Joshua has the utility for. So if you want to get the Iron Hands off the field, it either has to be KO'd or has to be a hard switch, and that might be too much risk. You want to use these Trick Room turns in order to get damage on the board. So if I was Joshua, I would keep this Iron Hands in play, try and go for something like a ferocious close combat into that opposing Incineroar, because that's not something it can ignore.
Fake Out, that'll be into the Blood Moon Ursaluna to make sure no damage done from that turn. Close combat fired back into it, not even picking up the KO, bringing it down to just a sliver of health. Now -2 defense and special defense. Raging Bolt still gets an action here. Dragon Pulse fired off into it. Iron Hands just barely surviving as well.
These clutch survivals on both Iron Hands and Incineroar in this turn, really bringing up the adrenaline of the match. Iron Hands now in a position, thanks to the Trick Room, where it can try and either finish off the Incineroar or try and get some physical damage onto this opposing Raging Bolt. Incineroar, however, in a very precarious spot.
Both of the Pokemon, both of the survivals here, you will have one more turn to be acting with that Iron Hands now with that survival, which is absolutely clutch here. And you still have a little bit of time to be making use of this Ursaluna. And you need to make sure you can do it fast. You can protect on this turn. You also on Victor's end can just be targeting down that slot. So hopefully you can find that mileage with that Iron Hands, but protect from the Raging Bolt as well.
I like the Raging Bolt, though, staying on the field and preserving it well. So going for the Protect is a really nice play. The Wild Charge was indeed targeting down that slot, so a great call by Victor, just making sure to keep this Calm Mind boosted Pokemon on the field. The Flare Blitz also going into the Protect, so a very null and void turn. Both trainers, playing defensively as Trick Room ends.
And then now it's going to be speed, more so in Victor's favor, considering the slower Pokemon over on Lorcy's end of the field here. And the Raging Bolt is still sitting at full health here. And it still has this +1 special attack and special defense boost. So it is something that could be putting off that pressure. And at this point, we still haven't seen idle Pokemon. We won't this time either. Dragon Pulse, that'll be more than enough to take care of that last final 3 HP.
I also like the fact that now Trick Room's over. You don't even have to worry about going for a Thunderclap. You can just go for these Dragon Pulses and get some really good damage out on the board. Just making sure to get those KOs. Ursaluna is able to retaliate and get the knockout on the Incineroar, however.
And at this point now, you only did a little bit of damage to that Raging Bolt with that Hyper Voice, considering the spread damage attack and that special defense boost that it already had here. But finally, this Iron Hand's going down. There is another threat in the back. It'll be the Heartflame Ogerpon over for Lorcy, but it will have to match up against this Rapid Striker Shifu over on Victor's end.
Both trainers down to their last 2 remaining Pokemon, so there can be no switchability on the field. Ogerpon, with the offensive pressure it can give out physically, can be a really good counter to this opposing Raging Bolt. However, Urshifu, being that offensive pressure, very, very speedy with the Choice Scarf, can hit hard with those surging strikes. It's not something that Joshua wants to take necessarily on either Pokemon. The Ogerpon as well, I don't know if it has enough in the tank to be able to get a one-hit KO. Well, it won't be one. It's taking a little bit of damage on Raging Bolt, but be able to get the knockout here. Maybe Ursaluna has to invest into that terrestrialization, even though it's specially defensively boosted up on Raging Bolt's side. It might give it that extra bit of damage to enable Ogerpon to get the knockout.
This feels so bad, especially if you're having to use something that could be dealing damage in this situation that's not able to then maybe have to go for that Follow Me instead, so that Ursaluna can be taking the brute force of that, because, hey, Victor, there's a lot of power still on that end. Terrestrialization coming out now here, trying to make the most of the damage coming out with just Terra Normal Blood Moon Ursaluna.
And if you're the Urshifu on Victor's side, what do you lock into here? Because it must be tempting to go for the close combat into that Ursaluna, but then you're going to be dropping your stats the whole time. You probably want to go for that Surging Strikes, but no offensive moves coming out from Ogerpon. Instead, the Follow Me, drawing in that close combat. So it doesn't get the knockout, but now Joshua knows that the opposing Urshifu is going to be vulnerable to extra damage.
That Ogerpon still just surviving. It won't survive that double up though. Dragon Pulse coming out, and it's now just this sole Blood Moon Ursaluna. Of course, you're going to get more damage coming out with this Blood Moon, but having to take down these Pokemon one at a time. Targeted into this Raging Bolt will be enough to be taking down the KO. 1 Pokemon apiece for these trainers.
Calm Mind is nothing in the face of that Terra-boosted Blood Moon. Such formidable damage cannot be used twice in a row for very good reason. Now the question is, the close combat on the Urshifu, it's Choice Scarf locked. Surely that's going to be enough to get the KO on Ursaluna.
Yeah, at this point too, the super effective hit. I mean, we talk about the amount of damage that Urshifu can do for a reason, right? So, hey, if we just have the craziest Ursaluna out there imaginable, then you know what, I'll eat my words on that one. But all things considered, think that this Ursaluna there's no shot here.
We have seen some, clutch 1, 2 HP survivals, but as you can see, it's looking a little bit difficult for Ursaluna. It can go for something like the Hyper Voice, but to be able to hang on after you've taken already a significant amount of damage against something like that close combat is just too high to climb. But let's have a look. Close combat comes in, and nobody's surprised there's a knockout.
I don't have to eat my hat this time around. Ursaluna is gonna go down, and with that, Victor to take this first match here in our round at 7. Great match, great play too, even just taking advantage of them. Like, hey, I can't stop the Trick Room. Right away, I'm gonna get set up with this Raging Bolt, and it did a lot in that match.
I agree, and I like the way that Lorcy was able to get that Trick Room set up nice and early, had good Pokemon in the back to be able to sweep through Trick Room, but then also the speedier Ogerpon maybe for when Trick Room was over. However, I think the one thing that Victor did really well was protect the Pokemon wisely. Going for the Protects on the Landorus and the Raging Bolt, for example, at opportune times when Lorcy maybe doubled up into that slot, just burnt through those Trick Room times, which meant that Lorcy couldn't capitalize on them.
And at this point too, even when Victor did let the Landorus go down, it was after it had protected one turn and had essentially soaked up a double up into that. Then the second time it went down, well, that's one turn of Trick Room that has essentially been wasted at this point. Not essentially, it was wasted. And then you didn't need it to be winning that match. Look at that. The boy who lived, that Incineroar just holding on a sliver of health there. And hails that you can't pick up like that. Devastating. Sure, the Iron Hands following that same thing, but the Iron Hands was dealt with once the Trick Room had ended.
Honestly, I'm just gone. This was such an incredible match. So many clutch survivals there. And although Blood Moon Ursaluna, I believe that was one of our caster prediction choices as well. I want to say it was Costa had it on there. It did a good job. The Blood Moon was very powerful into this Raging Bolt, and I was surprised that even with the Calm Mind, it went down. It just wasn't enough to go against that Urshifu. And I think when you think of the Battle of the Urshifus, you can see why this Water Terra Urshifu, particularly with the Choice Scarf, is so dominant right now.
Yeah, so now I'm looking at where there can be adjustments going on into this next one, because we got to see already that Victor did a really good job of playing around that Trick Room. Lorcy does have two different modes to his team. He does also have a faster mode to his team with this Tailwind to just kind of outspeed in that sort of way. It does feel a little bit bad in terms of the fact that maybe you're not wanting to bring the Farigiraf to that. There can be priority, but we got to see that the Farigiraf, all it really got to do was set up the Trick Room. It hit an attack into this Landorus that needed to be a double up anyways, and then, well, it got KO'd and priority was unlocked anyways. We got the Fako coming up from Victor, and it was kind of a little bit of a spiral from there.
I agree. The Psychic going down into that opposing Landorus was very unfortunate at the beginning of the game. Yes, Farigiraf was able to go through and try and get that knockout later, but as you said, it kind of was underwhelming despite that. Even if it had gone for something like a Helping Hand and then Lorcy had called correctly the right target with that Iron Hands, it might have been able to play a little bit more of a role and provide more synergy. But I think if Lorcy wants to go for that Trick Room mode again, obviously you have to bring the Farigiraf, but maybe find a way to get one of those sweepers like the Blood Moon Ursaluna onto the field more effectively.
It's even a case, too, that even looking at Ursi's team, I feel like it's really easy to get caught up in, hey, well, the Trick Room didn't go right. But there is even just like that Protect that made things go awry. So either viable, we will see the faster option this time around. Leading to this game, too, it will be the Tornadus and the Ursaluna side by side.
This is definitely a shake-up for the books. Lorcy bringing in the Tornadus that isn't known for Trick Room, but instead known for Tailwind, trying to boost up the speed very quickly and effectively on Lorcy's side, maybe allowing that Ursaluna to get some damage on the board before Raging Bolt can go for a Calm Mind.
Where this is tough, though, with the Urshifu being led over on Victor's end of the field, this threatens into the Ursaluna so much. So basically, you can get the speed on your end, but the damage capability coming out from the Ursaluna and the fact that you have an offensive Terra as opposed to a defensive one makes things a little bit tough. And if you're just having your Ursaluna just get KO'd and the Raging Bolt starts getting set up, well, then it's also going to be a really, really tough situation here. So being able to see the swap coming out to potentially soak up a close combat could be a fantastic switch.
You have to know when to protect your Pokemon, and this is a fantastic adjustment here. The Taunt coming through, actually, really love to see this. No Calm Mind can come through from Raging Bolt now, but the speed is still going to be in the corner of that opposing Urshifu. It was indeed locking in that close combat that's still with a critical hit, does huge damage to that Iron Hands, but critically the Ursaluna is safe in the back.
Yeah, that is not the damage sponge that you want at that point. The Taunt did stop the Raging Bolt from having that setup, though. It'll also be stopping it from a Protect. So it will be a Pokemon that Victor has to be swapping out if he doesn't want it to be falling into a potentially type of fate going on into this turn. Though I don't think it necessarily seems to be too threatened by either of these Pokemon right now. You could just start trying to deal a little bit of damage over onto Lorcy's end.
And this is where we've seen Iron Hands be so good in previous formats. It's on the field now. It can go for something like the Fake Out, enable the Tornadus to be able to try and get some damage out on the board, particularly against the Urshifu that still has that fighting type. If you want to go for something like the Bleakwind Storm, as long as it's able to connect, that will still deal significant damage.
Urshifu swapping out. -1 defense and special defense, absolutely no thank you. Incineroar coming in instead. This will also have the Fake-Out pressure going in on that next turn. The clear amulet onto the Iron Hands, no stat drop coming out from that Intimidate. Drastalization will be coming out here, though, quite early in this game number 2, and that'll be yet again the Raging Bolt.
Victor's not messing around here, wanting to make sure the Raging Bolt, even though it cannot go for the Calm Mind, that it has that defensive capability and can still apply pressure on the field. Becoming the Fairy type does give it a lot of nice coverage, particularly against the Iron Hands. The Fake Out going down into that slot means Raging Bolt will not be able to capitalize on its shiny new form, though.
It is going to be taking some damage from the Bleakwind Storm. A miss onto the Incineroar this time around. Now, Ictor is just going to be gaining a little bit of health back. Sure, you didn't necessarily get the boost that you wanted on the Raging Bolt, but you're not really taking the most damage anyways. We still haven't had Tailwind set up, so there could be the chance to just try and go for it now at this point. But at this point, it's like turn 3 and really not too much has happened.
I'd have to start worry about the Thunderclap coming through from Victor's Raging Bolt there into the Tornadus if you want to go for another Bleak Wind Storm per se. So possibly you're right, the Tailwind could be the safer play here, or you could try and utilize the opportunity to switch up the board position. The issue again is the Incineroars here for Victor can go for that fake out, can enable the Raging Bolt to just get some damage off on the board, but that Tailwind has finally come into play.
Be so risky to try and go for it when you can still be doing some damage. Close combat into Incineroar. Super effective hit. Would be more than great to get the KO this time around. A big piece of Victor's team gone. So that is a great way to start taking a little bit more momentum going on forward. Dragon Pulse now. The Iron Hand's already so low, and since this one doesn't have the Assault Vest, well, yet again, we're trading Pokemon.
Yes, and this gives both our trainers the opportunity to bring in one of those Pokemon from the back. Considering the Tailwind is now up on the field, this could be a nice opportunity for Lorcy to bring in something like maybe the Ogerpon in the back to be able to capitalize on this. Because as you mentioned before, the Choice Scarf on that Urshifu still does cause a few problems for the slower Pokemon on Lorcy's side, even in a Tailwind environment.
And the thing is you have to make sure the attackers that you have are doing the most in this situation. So the Heartflame Ogerpon coming out, not surprised at this point. It is still difficult when staring down this Raging Bolt, the damage output that you can be doing at this point. But at least you do have ways to be hitting into that Urshifu with something like a Wood Hammer. And since this Urshifu is Choice Scarf, it doesn't have a Detect.
Exactly. This is where things always get interesting for me when it comes to terrestrialization, because if you've got the Ogerpon on the field, you want it to start really trying to pack a punch and go through a lot of these opposing teams. Urshifu retreating here for Victor, wanting to keep it a little bit safer for later, maybe when when Tailwind is not on the field, and you can get that speed momentum once again. Tornadus just shutting down this Raging Bolt, does not want any Calm Minds, not here today, making sure it cannot go for any of those setup moves as Ogerpon just goes straight out for a Wood Hammer, catches the Landorus, does about 2/3 of damage.
There'll be a lot of damage done. Some recoil, though, and follow-up Dragon Pulse into it. Won't be enough for the KO, but Victor knowing that, hey, there is a potential of a taunt, or maybe even just wanting to start dealing some damage into this Ogerpon, just going on the offensive. Does mean that, again, there is still no Protect going out. You don't have to worry about a setup. But now from Joshua, you have to look at what options you want to be having here. I mean, it does have to be attacking time with the Tornadus. You've already set the Tailwind and the taunt. What else can you really do?
That's the thing. Tornadus is sitting very pretty on the field, but it's not doing a lot of damage. I think living in fear of that opposing Thunderclap that can come through from Raging Bolt. And Raging Bolt shut down at the moment. It doesn't have a choice but to go on the offensive. Yeah,
it could be the Dragon Pulse to be safe, or saying that, hey, what else can Lorcy really do? Go for it. Instead, into the Ogerpon, but the survival, not very effective hit, and that is going to be a huge survival. Ivy Control followed up, hitting into the Raging Bolt, will bring it down low. Bleak Wind Storm, that will be the double connect, enough to take care of the Landorus. The Raging Bolt so low.
Honestly, Tornadus got away by the skin of its teeth there, able to go and get the knockout on the opposing Landorus with the Bleak Wind Storm and dodging out of the way of a Thunderclap that was actually aimed for its partner. But even then, Lorcy's Ogerpon knew the stakes at play and was able to hang on.
And that is going to be such a key survival going on into this. Urshifu's going to be coming out into the field, and again, Choice Scarf. You have to pick your move, and that is going to be the move you're stuck with for the rest of the match. Ogerpon, you do have to be worried about the fact that there is still that priority potential coming out from that Raging Bolt, but that is something that could also be ate around.
I love this play by Lorcy here. You can go for something like the Follow Me, draw in the potential Thunderclap that threatens your Tornadus so heavily, allowing the Tornadus to go for that Bleak Wind Storm. It looks like it might be able to get the KO onto that opposing Raging Bolt, and at the same time, it's going to deal super effective damage to that opposing Urshifu. You know it can't terrestrialize. Raging Bolt's already done that. That would be some good damage as long as it can connect.
That's the biggest if. Aqua Jet from the Urshifu, that will be the connect here at that point to take that Ogerpon down, and now down to that Tornadus. Thunderclap, since one Pokemon was already taken care of, well, this one's going to be fired off. The Tornadus will survive. Super effective hit, and the Bleak Wind Storm, well, it's missing, and it won't take care of that Raging Bolt. The Urshifu surviving as well.
Doesn't manage to sweep the Urshifu off the field either. It's still hanging on. I mean, what an interesting interaction with those priority moves as well. Even though there was the Follow Me, being able to KO it with that Aqua Jet enabled Raging Bolt to be able to still deal big damage, but it didn't get a knockout. Tornadus is still in the game. The issue, however, is the Ursaluna. What can it really do against both of these Pokemon, particularly when the speed is not on its side?
Well, the thing is we still have this opportunity, maybe go for it, unless Victor wants to be trying to take care of the Tornadoes on this turn. But this Ursaluna does have full health, and it does have access to spread damage moves. And sure, these two Pokemon have survived, but they're not necessarily too healthy. And what was scaring down the Ursaluna before, which was so scary, was the close combat. We don't have access to that anymore, and we still have the Terastallization. So you can get out of that Water-type weakness and fire off this attack.
That's such a good point, actually. The Choice Scarf completely locking it into that Aqua Jet. It's a huge amount of pressure on Victor to have gone into that move because it cannot switch it up for that close combat. Once again, the Blood Moon Ursaluna in this end game going for its Terrestrialization. The Hyper Voice will be devastating to both these opposing Pokemon.
And that's the Blood Moon Ursaluna save for this Aqua Jet. It will be no speed, but unless this Raging Bolt can deal with this bear, we're getting so intense.
Oh, it gets it off.
But Calm Mind instead, trying to have some sort of survivability, but with this move, this will connect both. Surely this KOs.
That's the thing. I think the Calm Mind has come too little too late. The taunts from that Tornadoes have really helped out for this end game. Joshua Lorcy forcing into a game 3 here.
And really showing with different modes to the team the flexibility that it has and playing out of some really, really tricky situations as well. Of course, Victor having access to those priority moves was something you had to dance around the entire time. A super dangerous tango, but finding really good ways around that. And it was a really nice play from Victor to have that Aqua Jet into the Thunderclap. It was such a nice play, but the issue being you are now locked into that Aqua Jet that then loses you that end game when you are staring down a full health Blood Moon Ursaluna. So now we have to see in this game 3 where these trainers' minds are at. Because if you're Lorcy, well, the Tailwind mode won me the game. It wasn't a free match, though. And Victor now can play into that and has those kind of options. So I'd be really intrigued if he wants to kind of go back to try and catch Victor off guard or just straight commit.
For me, it was all about the Raging Bolt on Victor Medina's side. The fact that it was denied that Calm Mind, met that Thunderclap right at the end that finally was able to connect on the Tornadoes wasn't enough to get the KO. I think with possibly a boost on it, it might have been able to try and do something. But unfortunately, not being able to get that defensive capability up meant that the Hyper Voice towards the end was also able to easily secure the knockout. This was big damage as well. In game 1, we saw the Incineroar just hang on, but then I think the follow-up here just enabled that one precious piece on Victor Medina's team to fall very early on.
Yeah, and whether Lorcy knew that was supposed to be a roll or that he just got unlucky in that game 1, or not, being able to get the KO is so huge. Big survivals coming out too. I mean, that Ogerpon being able to take that hit, fire off, start dealing with the Raging Bolt. When you look at how much was returned, maybe it doesn't seem so significant at first, but it's the consistent damage that takes care of the Raging Bolt. And even that endgame, once it was finally not taunted, Calm Mind, well, it's not going to help you out in this case. You've already taken so much damage, and this Hyper Voice is more than enough to take care of things, especially in the Terastallized form.
And Tornadoes was able to sit very pretty on the field. I think in game 3, if Victor does see that, he might want to try and remove it from the field a little bit sooner. Stop it going for these Tailwinds, stop it going for these taunts.
Well, it's going to be big adjustment coming out from Lorcy, reminiscent of that game 1 here. Iron Hands Fergraph yet again, and Raging Bolt Urshifu over on Victor's end. This, I'm a little bit scared. This Urshifu will definitely be dealing some damage, and the Raging Bolt, again, if it doesn't feel threatened, can start setting up.
It's a very commanding start by Victor here. A lot of offensive pressure on the field. You can go for something like that Calm Mind again, but also Lorcy applying pressure with that Trick Room, maybe trying to get that sweeping momentum going through. The Terrestrialization coming straight out onto the Raging Bolt to no supplies. 3 out of 3 for this Raging Bolt going into its Fairy Terror.
Must really love that Raging Bolt giving the little heart to put on top of its head every single game so far. Urshifu not going for a super powerful hit other than that U-turn. This will be a chance to pivot out and actually pretty significant damage into the Fergraph, all things considered.
Yes, nice to be able to get a good chunk onto the Fergraph to leave it in a little bit more of a vulnerable spot going forward. And particularly with the Landorus coming in, this is a Pokemon that can apply great pressure to the Iron Hands with something like an Earth Power going forward. To no surprise, finally for this Raging Bolt, it's able to get that Calm Mind up when it wants to, boosting up its special defense and special attack to make it a little bit more formidable going forward. Of course, there was no fake out coming through. The close combat doing nothing to that Fairy Terror. A fantastic defensive play by Victor Medina.
And that's going to be a special defense and defense drop for that Iron Hand. Not posting it in the best positions, even with the Trick Room, the dimensions more so in its favor. And it feels bad when you're taking all of that in return for a Raging Bolt that's taken 25% health.
Yes, and now Iron Hand's in a dangerous spot. Yes, it can try and go for some some decent damage here, but the issue is that Earth Power coming through from the Landorus is going to hurt thanks to the close combat drop it took previously. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see Joshua try and double down into that Landorus like we saw in Game 1, but if there is a Protect, it's going to be null and void.
And it's whether Victor wants to go down that road again, knowing that Lorcy has that information or not. He will not. So this double up into it. First off, the close combat. We got to see it didn't do too much before, but the Farigiraf, of course, being slower, and that follow-up there with that Psychic into the Landorus. It's not going to be enough this time. Landorus on a sliver of health. The amount of survivals in this game is crazy. And now Dragon Pulse from the Raging Bolt will get rid of the draft.
And I'm worried for this Iron Hands if this is an Earth Power going into it while it's at -2 special defense. That is going to be a one-hit KO. Joshua Lorcy down 2 Pokemon early doors in Game 3.
You might have the Trick Room, you might have the Dimensions, but Victor fully in control to be kicking off that Twisted Room, getting the double KO. Ursaluna and Ogerpon, an opportunity to get something that could be putting on more pressure in that Trick Room, but it is an uphill mountain from here.
This is the thing, Trick Room's up, so you've got to utilize it. You're not going to be able to get it up again. The Trick Room user has been put back in his Pokeball, but Ogerpon doesn't necessarily want to be in this Trick Room environment either, so you might see Lorcy try and switch onto that more supportive mode, going for something like the Follow Me. But if Victor plays defensively enough, you can easily stall this out.
And the weird thing is despite the fact that you want to be taking advantage of the Trick Room, even a well-placed Protect, we got to see how far behind Lorcy fell in the first game when Victor had a well-placed Protect. So you can maybe even go for that. There is also the tricky situation that, sure, the Ursaluna does like to have these slow speeds. This Ogerpon, however, does not. This actually is a decently speedy enough Pokemon to where things are actually get kind of difficult given that. And the Landorus isn't necessarily the fastest over on the opposing end. So big decision. This could be a huge read to go on into this.
And you can see the time that Lorcy is taking. This is a critical moment in this set. Only a few seconds left on the clock, and we're going to see Terrestrialization coming out the blocks here for that extra oomph behind the attacks. This time, not on the Blood Moon Ursaluna. Instead, it's going to be on that Ogerpon, dropping its grass typing and using Embody Aspect to give it a +1 attack stat.
Try and make sure the attacks coming out are going to be dealing the damage you need, especially when you're staring down that Raging Bolt over onto the opposing end. But Protect, it's not wanting any of that. The Landorus already on a sliver protecting as well. So no damage coming out from Lorcy, and now you have the information of what is terrestrialized in that turn.
You said it just a moment ago, Sierra, that if Victor has a well-placed Protect, that can completely derail the way the Lorcy is trying to play through. And if you see this double Protect, not only does it stall through one turn of Trick Room, but it gives all of that critical information as well as just stopping Lorcy from gaining a bit of momentum.
Yeah, Victor just playing this super, super safe going on into this too, because there is the potential where you could be trying to, hey, well, I'm not expecting this to get hit or anything else, especially since that Hearthflame Ogerpon out of Trick Room potentially could maybe set something up, though you do have that Urshifu in the back, so maybe not worried about that too much. But now you have spent the Protect on both ends, so unless you want to be going for that double, you have to go ahead and take those attacks and surely let this Landorus get KO'd.
Yeah, Landorus is in a difficult spot where it has so much offensive pressure and so much capability, but it's also a prime target for Lorcy to try and target down. Landorus actually going to be preserved by Victor, maybe wanting to try and bring it out a little bit later to apply some pressure with something like that Earth Power into the Ogerpon.
And instead of coming in, the Embody Aspect, the Terrestrialization for the Ogerpon to get that +1 attack, it's actually brought down to neutral. You needed that damage output, and you're not going to get it. Hyper Voice is going to be doing a good, respectable amount of damage to both of these Pokemon. Dragon Pulse into the Ogerpon is significantly more, though. We will get a chance to fire off another attack. This will go into the Raging Bolt, but it won't be enough. That Intimidate was absolutely crucial.
You can see what a role stats are playing in this game. The +1 from the Calm Mind being so devastating with that Dragon Pulse, really putting Ogerpon in a detrimental position, as well as you mentioned, the Intimidate coming through, stopping Ogerpon from getting the KO in retaliation.
And at this point, too, with the Incineroar hitting the field, you're forced into the Double Protect and you're losing your Trick Room turns because, hey, this one Pokemon isn't necessarily too healthy, and you cannot let, hey, the potential of the Blood Moon and then just the Raging Bolt targeting into the Heartflame Ogerpon. So you're forced into the Double Protect, waste the turn of Terrestrialization, but that does not feel good either way.
That's the thing, Thunderclap can just clean up here into that opposing Ogerpon, as well as allowing the Incineroar to go for that fake out and slow the Ursaluna down in its tracks. Yes, Joshua's going for the Protect on the Ursaluna and on the Ogerpon here, but as you mentioned, it goes through one turn of Trick Room. It just starts spelling a little bit of disaster for Lorcy's team here.
Yep, fake out from Incineroar into that Blood Moon Ursaluna. Of course, you have to put so much respect on that. Raging Bolt with the attempt into the Hearthflame Ogre Pawn. Like, it had to be what it had to be, right?
Yeah, there wasn't really too many other options for Victor here, but at the end of the day, there wasn't a lot to lose, to be fair, from that particular turn.
Whereas Lorcy had everything to lose in that.
Yeah.
That was the final turn of Trick Room here. And as you said, there is that Thunderclap pressure coming out from the Raging Bolt. The Ursaluna does have a lot of health here at this point. So if you can get through and target in, that could be really, really nice. You could even look at a potential KO. So there is that capability, but as soon as that Urshifu comes in, it's going to be just game, set, and done.
That's the thing. Victor just needs to get rid of this Ogre Pawn, and then, as you mentioned, the Urshifu in the back can absolutely clean up against this opposing Ursaluna here. Close combat surging strikes. He's got a whole utility of options here. Landorus actually going to switch in, just keep maybe the fake out pressure for a little bit later on, as the priority Thunderclap deals with that Ogre Pawn, and now it is Blood Moon Ursaluna against the formidable team, all 4 Pokemon remaining of Victor Medina.
Victor's been playing safe, play even safer. You can have your 2 Pokemon, you can have your Shifu and your Incineroar in the back. Fake out, regardless, you're going to be taking the KO and just get rid of that Blood Moon Ursaluna. So it's great, double KO over on this turn, but the Pokemon preservation, that's going to be the key thing in this. And with the Ursaluna not having access to, even it would not appreciate the close combat, but it can't even get out of any weaknesses here.
Particularly with its speed disadvantage. And I think it genuinely got those 2 KOs just to spite me from saying that it was up against 4 Pokemon remaining on the other side. But as mentioned, even though Victor only has 2 and it's 2v1, that's not necessarily the most impossible of situations. The fake out pressure, the fact that the Iron Fist will go through the opposing Pokemon just means that Victor can clean this up.
Not too surprised to see the battle been called, and with that, Victor Medina to take a 2-1 here, now 7-0 here at EUIC and making his way into day 2.